Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. I grew up around forests, so the woods never scared me the way they scared other people. Trees were just trees. Paths were just paths. That confidence is the reason I went alone. The research grant was small, barely enough to cover supplies, but it meant weeks of isolation in a protected woodland that hadn't been logged or developed in over a century. Old-growth forest, thick canopy, minimal foot traffic. The kind of place where sound behaves strangely and time feels less stable than it should. I told myself that feeling was romantic nonsense. I parked at the trailhead just after sunrise. No other cars, no signs warning people away. The trail itself was narrow, barely maintained, as if the forest tolerated it rather than allowed it. Within 10 minutes, my phone lost signal. Within 20, the air felt heavier. Like humidity without heat, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet, no birds, no insects. My footsteps sounded too loud, crunching against the leaf litter like I was breaking some rule I didn't know existed. Every few minutes, I had the urge to turn around, not because I was afraid, but because something felt unfinished behind me, like I'd forgotten an important step. I ignored it. My campsite was near a creek, shallow and slow-moving, the water dark with tannins. I set up my tent, marked coordinates, and started documenting tree growth patterns. Everything looked normal on paper. The forest didn't. That night, the sounds started. Not animals, not wind, movement, slow, deliberate movement, just beyond the edge of the firelight. Leaves compressing under weight, branches bending carefully so they wouldn't snap. Whatever it was knew how to move quietly, and more unsettling than that tit knew when I was listening. Every time I focused on the sound, it stopped. I slept poorly, waking up repeatedly with the certainty that I was being watched, not hunted, observed, like I was part of an experiment I hadn't agreed to in the morning. I found footprints. They weren't clear impressions, more like disturbances, leaves pressed down in the vague shape of steps. Too evenly spaced, too intentional. They circled my campsite, but never crossed into it. I told myself it was a deer. I didn't believe it. As the days passed, the forest began to change in small ways. Trails I'd marked didn't lead where they had before. Trees I swore were distinctive split trunks. Lightning scars appeared in places they hadn't been. My compass spun uselessly whenever I walked more than a few hundred meters from camp. The worst part was the voices at first. It was just my name, spoken softly, carried on no clear source of sound. It always came from behind me. When I turned, there was nothing there. Then it started using other voices. My sister, an old friend, people I hadn't thought about in years. The tone was always casual, conversational, like they were just around the bend in the trail. I stopped responding. On the 5th night, I woke to find my fire pit cold and my tent unzipped. I know I had zipped it. The forest beyond the mesh seemed closer somehow. Trees leaning inward, shadows overlapping where they hadn't before. I smelled damp soil and something older rat, but not decay. More like memory. I heard footsteps again. This time, they didn't stop when I listened. They circled slowly, brushing against the edge of the campsite, close enough that I could hear fabric moving, breath shifting. I held my own breath, afraid sound itself might invite whatever it was closer. Then something pressed against the side of my tent. Not hard, not violent, just enough to let me know it could. I stayed frozen until dawn, When the light finally filtered through the canopy, the forest looked almost normal again. Almost. I packed quickly, ignoring my own shaking hands, determined to leave before nightfall, no matter what data I lost. That's when I realized the trail back was gone. Not hidden, not overgrown, gone. In its place were trees so dense they looked woven together, trunks bent and curved unnaturally, blocking the direction I knew led out. When I tried another route, I ended up back at my campsite. Again and again. Panic set in slowly, the way hypothermia does. Quietly, logically, I marked trees, broke branches, left scraps of bright fabric. Every marker vanished within hours. The forest didn't erase them, it absorbed them. On the 7th night, I stopped fighting it. I sat by the dead fire pit and spoke out loud, my voice shaking as I said I was leaving, that I didn't belong there, that I was sorry. The forest responded, not with words, with movement. Trees shifted, not violently. Paths opened where there had been none. The air felt lighter, like a pressure release. I followed the opening without questioning it, afraid to think too hard and break whatever fragile permission I'd been given. I reached the trailhead. Just before dusk, my car was still there, covered in leaves, cold to the touch. I didn't look back when I left. Weeks later, back home, I noticed something strange. Mud on my boots that wouldn't wash off. Leaves in my backpack that crumbled into dark dust when touched. And sometimes, when I'm walking through a park, or even down a tree-lined street, I feel it, again, that subtle pressure, between the trees. Watching, waiting. The woods don't chase you. They don't need to. They remember where you are. I learned the hard way that some forest trails don't want to be finished. I was hiking a loop trail in a state forest I'd visited dozens of times before. Nothing remote, nothing forbidden, just a long, winding path that dipped into thick woodland and came back out near a river overlook. I chose it because it was familiar, because familiarity feels like safety. The map at the trailhead showed the loop clearly, 8 miles, one direction in, one direction out. I took a photo of it, out of habit, adjusted my pack, and stepped under the trees. The woods swallowed sound almost immediately. Not silence more, like everything was padded. My boots on dirt sounded dull. The breeze felt delayed, like it arrived a second after it should have. I shook it off, and kept walking. About an hour in, I noticed the first odd thing. I passed the same fallen log twice. It was distinctive, thick, moss-covered, split down the center like it had been struck years ago. I remember stepping over it carefully the first time, then frowning when I saw it again. I checked my GPS. According to it, I was still moving forward. I assumed I'd missed a turn. The second time it happened, I stopped walking. Ahead of me, the trail curved gently left, just like before. The same birch tree with pale bark leaned over the path. The same cluster of stones sat half buried near the edge. Everything matched my memory too well to be coincidence. I turned around. The trail behind me looked normal, inviting, even. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in soft patches, showing me exactly where to step. I walked back. 5 minutes later, I reached the fallen log again. My stomach dropped. This time I marked it. Scratched my initials into the bark with my knife, deep enough to scar the wood. I took a photo, forced myself to breathe, and stepped over it. When I came back to it the 4th time, the initials were gone. The bark was smooth. I don't mean healed, I mean untouched. That's when I started to feel watched. Not from one direction, from all of them. Like the space between the trees was crowded with attention. Every time I stopped moving, the forest felt closer, branches dipping slightly, leaves shifting without wind. I called out. My voice didn't echo. It didn't even carry. It felt like it fell straight to the ground. I tried leaving the trail. That was my next mistake. The undergrowth looked thin enough, but the moment I stepped off the path, the ground became uneven and resistant. Roots catching my boots, branches snagging my clothes. Progress slowed to a crawl. When I turned back toward the trail, it wasn't there. Panic came in waves. I told myself to stay calm, to think clearly, but every direction looked the same. Trees spaced just far enough apart to confuse distance. Light filtered evenly from everywhere, offering no real sense of time. I walked until my legs ached. Then, I found the trail again. Relief hit so hard I laughed out loud. I stepped onto the packed dirt, promising myself I'd stay on it no matter what. 5 minutes later, I saw the fallen log this time. Something was sitting on it, not an animal. It was shaped like a person, but wrong in the details. Too still, too symmetrical. Its back was to me, posture perfect, hands resting on its knees. I couldn't see its face. I stopped breathing. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if listening. I didn't wait to see more. I ran. The trail stretched, narrowed, curved sharply where it hadn't before. My lungs burned. My vision tunneled. Behind me, I heard footsteps, not chasing, not rushing, matching my pace exactly. When I tripped and fell, the footsteps stopped. I lay there shaking, face pressed into the dirt, afraid to look up. A presence loomed close. I could feel it, like pressure against my spine. Then, quietly, something stepped past me. I heard it walk away down the trail, its steps fading into the distance. When I finally stood, the forest felt different, looser, less focused. I walked for another hour without seeing the log again. The trail ended at the river, overlooked just as the map promised. My car was still in the parking lot. Other people were there too, laughing, stretching, checking phones. Normal sounds returned all at once, overwhelming me. I drove home in silence. Later that night, I checked my phone. The photo of the trail map was gone. In its place was a picture I don't remember taking. A forest path, stretching ahead, and carved into a fallen log in the foreground were my initials. Fresh, deep dot, like I'd just put them there. I started noticing it on the third day. At first I thought it was just bad luck with the terrain. I was deep in a managed forest, the kind with long straight service trails and dense growth on either side. I was there for a week, documenting soil samples and plant recovery after a controlled burn. Nothing unusual, no warnings, no local legends that I knew of. The first footprint appeared beside mine in soft dirt near a stream crossing. Same size, same tread pattern, same wear on the heel. That alone wouldn't have bothered me if I hadn't been alone. I crouched and studied it for a long time, telling myself someone else must have passed through earlier. But the soil was still damp, the edges of the print crisp. It was fresh as mine. I looked ahead on the trail. Only my footprints continued. Behind me, the second set stopped right where I was standing. I laughed it off, uneasy but rational. Maybe I'd doubled back without realizing it. Maybe the light was playing tricks on me. Forests are good at that. By late afternoon, it happened again. This time, I noticed it immediately. I stepped over a fallen branch and glanced down out of habit. 2 footprints appeared in the dirt. Mine and another set, perfectly aligned beside them. I didn't move for a full minute. The forest felt still, but not empty. Leaves hung motionless. The air pressed in around me, heavy in a way that made breathing feel deliberate, like I had to remember how to do it. Slowly, carefully. I took 1 step forward. Another footprint appeared next to it, not behind me, beside me. I backed away until my heel hit a root, and nearly sent me down. The second set stopped when I stopped. No sound, no movement in the trees, just proof in the dirt that something was matching me exactly. I left the trail and returned to camp before sunset, heart hammering, eyes scanning the woods the entire way. I kept expecting to see someone step out from behind a tree, laughing, explaining the trick. No one did. That night, I heard footsteps outside my tent, slow, measured, familiar. I recognized the rhythm before I understood why it terrified me. It was my walk, same pacing, same slight pause every few steps, the one I never noticed until then. Whoever or whatever was out there circled the campsite without breaking stride, never stepping on branches, never brushing against gear. I stayed silent, hands clenched so tight they hurt. When the footsteps stopped, they stopped directly outside the tent entrance. I didn't unzip it. I didn't breathe. After a long moment, the steps resumed and moved away, fading into the trees. The next morning, I found the prints again. This time, they were inside the campsite. One set leading in, 2 sets leading out. The second set didn't match mine anymore. They were still shaped like boots, but the proportions were wrong. Too long, too narrow. The toe drag was exaggerated, as if whoever wore them didn't quite lift their feet properly. I packed up immediately. The hike back should have taken 3 hours. It took all day. Every time I stopped to check my bearings, I felt it's someone standing just out of sight, perfectly still, waiting for me to move first. I never saw it, not once. But the forest felt crowded, like I was walking through a place already occupied. Near dusk, I reached the trailhead. I didn't relax until I saw my car. Even then, I didn't turn my back on the trees until I was inside. Doors locked. Weeks later, back home, I noticed something strange. Mud on the floor near my front door. Boot prints. One pair was mine. The other was almost the same. Almost whatever. Learned how to walk like me. Didn't stay in the forest. It just needed enough practice, and I gave it plenty. I went into the woods because I needed quiet. Not peace, just quiet. After my divorce, the house felt too loud even when nothing was happening. Every creak sounded like accusation. Every silence felt heavy. So when my friend suggested I use his family's old cabin for a few days, I didn't hesitate. The cabin sat deep in state forest land, accessible only by a gravel road that narrowed into something barely passable. No neighbors, no cell service, just trees packed so tightly they blocked most of the sky. I told myself that was the point. The first day passed without incident. I unpacked, cleaned, walked the nearby trails, and cooked a simple meal before nightfall. The woods were dense but familiar, the kind that made you feel small in a comforting way. I slept better than I had in months. The second day, I heard my name. I was washing dishes when it happened. Clear, calm, familiar. My name spoken from outside the cabin, just beyond the tree line. I froze, hands submerged in soapy water. It sounded like my sister. That made no sense. She didn't know where I was. No one did except my friend, and he was states away. I dried my hands slowly and stepped onto the porch. The woods stood still. No movement. No footsteps retreating. Just trees and shadow. I told myself sound carries strangely in forests. Wind bends voices. Memory fills in gaps. I went back inside and locked the door, annoyed with myself for reacting. An hour later, it happened again. This time, it sounded closer. My name spoken softly, like someone trying not to startle me. I didn't respond. That was instinct, not logic. Something in me understood that answering would be a mistake, even if I didn't know why. I sat perfectly still on the couch, listening. Leaves shifted. A branch bent slowly, deliberately, then footsteps light. Careful approach to the cabin before stopping just short of the porch. No knock came. The third call happened after dark. I was in bed, lights off, when my name came through the window. Same voice, same tone, patient. "I know you're in there." My chest tightened. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying. I hadn't left lights on. The cabin should have looked empty from the outside. I pulled the blanket up and stayed silent. The voice sighed, not frustrated, disappointed. The next morning, I found footprints around the cabin. Bare feet, long toes, too evenly spaced. They circled the structure, but never crossed onto the porch. Wherever they stopped, the ground looked pressed down harder than it should have been, like something heavy had stood there for a long time. I packed up. I didn't care about embarrassment or wasted time. I just wanted out. But when I started the car, the engine stalled. Twice. On the third try, it turned over reluctantly, like it was being forced. As I drove back down the road, I heard my name again. Not from the woods this time, from the back seat. I slammed the brakes and turned around. Nothing was there. No voice followed. No movement. Just the quiet hum of the engine and my own breathing. I didn't stop driving until I reached the main road. I haven't gone back to that cabin. My friend later told me his grandparents stopped using it years ago. When I asked why, he hesitated before saying people used to hear things there. Familiar voices. Voices that wanted you to come outside. I didn't tell him what happened to me. But sometimes, late at night, when my apartment is quiet and the windows are open, I hear my name again. Not loud, not threatening, just close enough to make me wonder if answering would finally make it stop. I never do, because the woods don't shout. They wait.